Story 1. Spinning a pen around my thumb. So many classes in college wasted trying to practice doing nothing but that. Then, after I mastered it, so many classes in college were wasted doing nothing but that. Story 2. I've perfected the ability to identify television shows and movies based just on their background music. It's like my personal party trick, even if nobody else notices. Story 3. I can stand on the literal tips of my toes without ballet flats or any sort of training in dance. I'm a swimmer, and I just naturally have very strong toes. I don't know, I like that. Story 4. I can write in Tolkien's Elvish alphabet. It's totally useless as a skill, but I just found doodling in it was a good way to stop myself drifting off completely during remote meetings at work. Story 5. I can make little transforming paper origami ninja stars. It's a skill I picked up when I was in the 5th grade. I borrowed an origami book from our school library, and someone had left one inside the book. I studied how it was made, and 30 years later I can still make them from memory. Am I proud of the skill? Maybe not. But they make for fun little things to give away to people. Story 6. I can swap between the Vulcan hand gesture and middle two fingers together, ring and pinky splayed on both hands quickly. Also with a different gesture on each hand, not both the same though a lot slower. Story 7. I can get crumpled notes to work in vending or cash machines within 2 tries as long as the bill is fully intact. I'm not secretly proud of it, though. I love it, and I call it my very specific superpower. Story 8. I grew up on Air Force bases. I can identify an F-15, F-16, F-111, A-10, C-5, and C-141 just from the sound of the engines while they are flying by. None of those things ever fly around where I live now, so I never even get to use it. Story 9. I worked at a water park as a manager, and the entire season I had a certain employee on the register, so he could teach me and help me master my gleeking skills. I became obsessed with my practice. Nowadays, I don't gleek much, but if someone challenges me, I'm winning that for sure. Story 10. Have your hand like this, where you have all your fingers up straight, like a high five. Now only put your pinky finger down and touch your palm while your other fingers remain straight and pointed upwards. The ring finger shouldn't come down with the pinky at all. Haven't come across anyone who could do it. Story 11. Flipping things and catching them upright. It's amazing how impressed people are with a little hand-eye coordination. I do it with cups and bottles all day, sometimes at work while walking. Can't juggle, but I can give a bottle 14 rotations and miss grazing the ceiling by an inch and catch it again. Story 12. I'm very good at finding loopholes. What I mean by that is, in games like Dota, Hearthstone, and Summoner's War, which I played for some time, I could make things broken only to see some time later professionals abuse them in tournaments. Completely useless, but still proud of it. Story 13. We used to poke fun at one guy nicknamed Pigeon at sports by imitating cooing, and it somehow stayed with me. So now I can say I am an unofficial pigeon sound artist. Story 14. I used to stitch footbags for world champion tier freestyle players. Funny enough, I mainly stitched to trade with other big stitchers and exchange ideas. I've got bags I traded with Hania, Marco, Bear, Clavens, Holly, Sam, Brad, MC, shoot. My brain hurts thinking of all the great folks I've swapped with from the late 2000s. I bet I made close to 100, and probably have about 30 trades from the greats of that era. All cherished and with their own stories. Good times. Edit. Oops, I didn't pay attention to the criteria of useless skills. Forget it, leaving my comment because it made me smile remembering all the fun we had. Story 15. There was a game at the Chuck E. Cheese in my town called Can Alley. You would throw ball pit balls into a trash can as it opened and closed its lid. I played this game well into my 20s until they took the game out. Not to brag, but I am the greatest Can Alley player who ever lived. I've mastered the perfect technique and, even though it's been 15 years since I last played, I would eagerly bet my house against anyone on the planet in a game. Story 16. If I use my left hand, I can write backwards with no effort. And I mean mirror-like backwards, where every letter is mirrored. I can also type with both hands at the same time, the same thing mirrored. Makes for an interesting joke when I use the chalkboard in class. Story 17. Not mine, but my boyfriend can listen to movies and television shows and guess the trumpet player on the score. Look it up and he is spot on. I always act impressed. Story 18. Dropping my underwear down to my feet, stepping out with one foot, then kicking it off with the other and catching it midair. I guess it doesn't really count since it makes my partner roll their eyes, which is useful. And I make no secret that I enjoy that. Story 19. I have mastered the art of throwing things into other things from across the room. Think tossing a pencil into a cup, a sock into the laundry basket, or a piece of popcorn into my mouth. Completely useless but incredibly satisfying when I nail it on the first try. Story 20. I can make origami birds, so I will leave them everywhere I go. Been out to buy food and have a receipt. Tiny paper bird. Scrap paper in class. Tiny paper bird. I do a load of washing, big towel origami bird. Story 21. I work as a cook at a brew pub, and before that, I spent several years at a seafood restaurant. On the fryer, I have to drop shrimp in counts of 3, 6, 8, and 12 for various dishes, and I rarely have to count them anymore, even when dropping multiple together, such as a 3 and 8, because my hand just knows how many I need. Every time I do count, it's right, and I ask myself why I even bothered. Story 22. One summer vacation when I was about 9 or 10, I learned how to complete a cube-shaped marble maze so well I could do it with my eyes closed in about 15 seconds. Story 23. I can meow like a cat, and this makes cats confused because they think another cat is around and they will keep searching for one, when it's just me meowing at them. Story 24. I can eat things in balanced portions from the first bite to last. For example, curry and rice. I will always have the final bite be a perfect one-to-one of curry and rice. I won't have just rice or curry left over. It really is useless, but I like that I can enjoy my food until the very last bite. Story 25. Waited tables in college and can spin any flat object like the drink trays all day every day. The only people impressed by it are little children. The weirdest part is I can't do it with anything round, like a basketball. Only flat things like plates, books, laptops, etc. Story 26. I have memorized the Plains comic book featuring Dusty Crobhopper, as it was the only book that could lull my son to sleep, allowing me to read it in the dark. Story 27. I can open a Starburst wrapper completely in my mouth in about 3 seconds. Growing up, my brother and I used to have a competition doing it, and I just got insanely fast at it. Absolutely the most useless skill to have. But hey, it lets me be lazy when eating Starburst. Story 28. I can balance any object 8 inches long or larger on the tip of one finger. I can move the object between fingers. I can even throw the object and then catch it balanced on my palm. I can walk around while doing it. Hammers, scissors, wet floor signs, and so on. I watched a lot of Unbeatable Banzook as a kid, and I was convinced this would be a useful skill. Story 29. How to play the old-fashioned game Cat's Cradle. Modern people don't even know what that is, and the teenage crowd is completely baffled by a middle-aged person playing with a piece of yarn tied in a big loop and then single-handedly making mesmerizing shapes with it. Deer in headlights expression. Rolling on the floor laughing. And to think we used to have competitive matches on the playground during recess. Story 30. I am pretty good at flipping coasters off the bar and catching them in increasingly bigger stacks with one motion. But now, rereading the question, I don't think it's totally useless because I am confident it has gotten me laid a few times. Story 31. Going into imagination land when I feel awkward in a room full of people puts a smile on my face, and people assume I'm blending and socializing well. It makes me feel happy to be there. Story 32. I can list the number of Henry VIII's 6 wives and how they either died, were beheaded, divorced, or survived him, in the order in which he married them. Story 33. I can spin any set of keys on my finger, then flick it up and catch it. I just thought about it one day and practiced with the set I had, and once I nailed it with that, any other set, regardless of the number of keys and key rings attached, all felt pretty intuitive. Story 34. I memorized the longest song title in the world when I got a copy of the Guinness Book of World Records. I'm a clanky old Yank in a clanky old tank on the streets of Yokohama with those Beato Beato Hirohito blues. Hoagie Carmichael. I've also never heard the song. Story 35. I worked at a toy store a long time ago, and we had to demonstrate products, so I taught myself to juggle using this juggling kit. I also got really, really good at aiming those air bazooka things. Story 36. I can do all three mouth trills at the same time. Lip trill, tongue trill, and velar trill. Story 37. I can voluntarily move my nostrils, even when I smile. Got challenged to learn it by a friend as a teenager because it looks and feels hilarious to flutter the nostrils. We competed on making the other laugh even across rooms. Mastered it back then, can still do it 30 years later. Story 38. Balancing things on my head. It gets really impressive since I am also a klutz and have fallen down a flight of stairs more than once and haven't dropped the stuff. People think it is glued on somehow. It is just totally funny to me that people can't figure it out. I just don't brag about it or even talk about it. I just do it. It is pretty useful too, as it frees up my hands. Story 39. I used to integrate courier software for online sellers. So now I can identify a courier from the tracking number, assuming it's one of the 8 couriers my previous company used. Story 40. I am not a musician, but I have been told by other musicians that I have a very fine-tuned musical ear. I am not entirely sure what that means, but it's often said after I can describe to musicians my reasons for liking individual songs. I can do things like recognize the same song sampled on other later songs, despite it being used very differently, and can describe how it has been sampled. Story 41. Being able to whistle different notes while breathing in and out, and also controlling the loudness. Everyone in my family could do it except me, and it took a long time before I figured it out. I practiced so hard that now I can whistle any song from memory or after hearing it once or twice. I've always wanted to whistle songs from my favorite video games like Zelda, and now I can do it effortlessly, and I'm proud of myself for it. Story 42. I learned a bunch of pen tricks. At school, people learned how to do thumb arounds, and it looked cool, so I looked up how to do it. Then I went on a whole adventure of pen spinning videos and tutorials. I started getting them down, and while I'm not nearly as good as the experts, I can do a bunch of tricks that look pretty cool. Story 43. Robert Downey Jr. can do this triplet snap slap thing that intrigued me. I think he did it in Civil War a lot. Anyways, I learned to snap with my left better and then time it in a triplet snap slap. Now I love to do it when my hands are free. Story 44. I can whistle while exhaling or inhaling, so I can constantly whistle songs without having to stop to breathe. I also figured out how to adjust for the sound difference so it's not that noticeable. Story 45. I'm exceptionally clumsy and frequently stumble when I walk. I'd normally sprain or roll my ankle, but I am able to relax and recover my step without injuring myself. I know this is a technique taught in martial arts, but it's something I do naturally. Story 46. I can make a dog whistle sound with my throat. The best part is I can do it with my mouth closed, so even if it sounds like it's coming from me, it doesn't look like it. I'm driving my annoying coworker crazy with it because the rest of the people who sit near us are so old. She's the only other one who can hear it. Story 47. I can crack my ears. If I pull them up and out just right, I get a crack just like with cracking knuckles. Considering we do not have bones in the outer ear, I can only assume I am doing something weird with my ear cartilage. I also taught myself how to fold my tongue into a W. I was pretty proud of that one. Story 48. I can inflate the bottom part of my lower jaw somewhat similarly to a toad. Technically, it is not really inflating but rather pushing a muscle. I have not met anybody else who was able to do it properly in my 45 years of life. On the other hand, I do not think anyone tried for more than 3 minutes. I can, of course, also wiggle my ears and shift my scalp back and forth, and move my nostrils at will. Story 49. I can tell if a Rubik's Cube is in a solvable state or not, meaning there is no single twisted corner, flipped side, or swapped pair, just by carefully examining it while it's still scrambled. Story 50. Revolving a book on top of my index finger. I broke a couple of serving trays and tore down books during my childhood to learn it. Why serving trays? Because they had better balance points than books, so it was easier to control during the learning phase, and they broke when I dropped them while learning. Story 51. I can almost for sure wreck anyone you have met at foosball, not that anyone cares or plays seriously anymore. At the teen center in my town, we had strict rules. Shots did not count if they touched any opposing player in any way, bank shots had to be called, and goalie shots were worth 2 points. There was always a long line to get on the table. It turned out the competition there was the best I would see anywhere, so once I became the top player there, everywhere else was light work. Lots of bar bets were won when foosball used to be a thing. Story 52. That noise people make by putting their index finger on the inside of their cheek and pulling it. I can do that by putting my finger behind my middle bottom 2 teeth and pulling it back. Story 53. I can copy almost any signature fairly quickly. My handwriting always changes, and I'm pretty good with calligraphy. The only use I've had for it without being in jail was signing my mom's name on a bad math test. Haha. Story 54. I can spin stuff on my fingers. I managed to spin a small lightweight table on one finger, and I'm proud of it. If I ever come to your house and sit on your couch, I'm 100% spinning your couch pillows. Story 55. I'm convinced my friend and I became world-class at Wii Sports basketball over lockdown. We played as a group at first, but it became clear we were the best and we'd have several 7-game series with our other friends watching. Pump fakes with the Wii remote, quick three-pointers in one motion, off-the-dribble shots. We even figured out how to set a screen if you dribbled a certain way. I'm not sure it entirely applies to the post, but I'd fancy my chances against anyone at that game. Also, I'm pretty good at catching food in my mouth, specifically grapes. I spent many classes with a friend launching grapes across the classroom so I could catch them.